hopefully be a quick video concerning this graph and another one. This graph is not meant to represent anything in particular. It's simply a random graph I got off the internet. Dear YouTube moderators and flaggers. So, what we see here is a waveform. It's indicating time and date stamps from October 3rd at the extreme end on the left to July 23rd on the right. We see a square wave here. April 7th, April 13th. We have May 27th for the peak of basically a literal shark fin shape. And then another minor peak June 7th and a general downward trend. We see a drop and then an uptick February 24th. And over here we see several January 19th and 26th spikes. Here's a shelf that's interesting that stopped being a shelf January 7th. Here's December 22nd. There's November 25th and 29th with this drop and then an increase. Now, we're going to be looking at the next graph for a little while later with a similar but not obviously not identical wave shape. If you're doing stonks or you're worried about theft of a valuable commodity, we'll call this the theft rate or the theft graph. Now we see a similar set of characteristics here. I'm going to be bouncing back and forth, but anyway, this one does not have a smooth slope from here to here. That's not there. This is for 2021, November 26th at this far edge. Over here to July 2nd over here, and that's a June 28th. I'm going to call it a peak. It's really hard to see because there's a lot less variation here. You also notice that this peak, this flat over here, May 2nd up to May 9th, is around 500, 600. The previous one was at 1,000. Here we see another spike at 28th of this year, 10th, and then we see a shelf again over here. That's a minor one, but it's a shelf. January 23rd, there's January 16th and 18th, and here's the Decembers and such. I'm going to bounce back and forth and point out things that are similar. Here's that square wave I was talking about, April 7th through 13th, but now it's May 2nd through 9th, and it's so distinctive, I'm going to call that a a landmark. So April 13th is when this square wave dropped violently. May 9th is when it did. So April through May. So this year's curves might be delayed or might be stretched out a month. So it's April to May. Pretty similar timing, but not quite. Here's June 8th here. Over here we have May 27th. June 9th. They're not quite lined up. And here's a little peak and then the downward trend that's pretty smooth. June 7th, and here's June 28th for that peak. So our last year predictable data forward, being extrapolated forward, reads that June 28th and June 7th from last year, approximately. So what we should say here is, this is me doing a really crappy job trying to predict this. Again, we're doing stonks, not something controversial. So June 28th, if this curve is going to be repeated this year, that means from June 28th forward through July, we should see a downward curve in our, let's call this a loss prevention graph, because this is something we're losing. Now let's look at our spikes. That's February 24th. That's February 28th last year. So that spike, oh, excuse me, this year. I'm sorry, I'm getting confused. February 28th last year, or is it this year? I'm confused. Okay, February 24th, 2021, and it's 28th this year. Okay, there we go. Right? I don't know. Let's call it that. So that's a delay of only 4 days. But look at this long stretch of downturn. Now there's a spike there, kind of. So we have last year this major drop off and then a spike in April. This one's a longer slide before we had a spike in May. Okay, that's February 10th, January 26th, so January, February. Okay, that's 2021 January, and it happened in February, a month later approximately. Well, a little less. Let's call it 20 days later. And that shelf, January 6th from 2021, it's January 23rd. So we're talking around a 20-day delay in what we see last year. Let's assume that. So let's look at last year's square wave. April 13th, 20 days added on. That's close enough. So I was wrong about my presumption of our loss graph and our loss prevention thing here at World Domination Headquarters, or whatever you want to call it. We're still having half as much problems. I mean, this is at 500, and last year it was at 1,000, almost exactly. So I'm going to do a new prediction. I was figuring that we would have this downslope and it'd be down here already by July 4th. I'm assuming at this point that this is going to be a slow slog downhill June instead. From June last year, excuse me. So from this point forward, we should see this downturn. Now here's my advice. To reduce our losses in our large cooperative corporation kind of thing, all of you stonkers, I'm suggesting that you pay attention to the fact that if you try to get on an airplane anywhere, there's so many delays and crap. I'm recommending every one of you do a staycation instead of going on vacation. I'm asking everyone to say, you know what, I'm going to lose my freedoms because I want more freedom next year. I'm asking. Because the way you beat things down, I mean, at this point it's like 200 last year. We could get this down below the 100 mark, and at that point, it would be over with. Truly. It would be just not having to go out and mess with airplane trips and boats, and just stay home. I'm requesting it. I think you should encourage people to do it. Now, if anybody's curious, I never ask people to share things on Facebook or whatever. I'm still not. But you can steal these images from the imager below and tell people, you know what? We could turn that into this year and maybe have our losses drop. We don't want to take the L, so don't take the L. Thanks for watching. Have a good day. Good